Welcome to the Rejected Religion podcast and to this bonus episode with Dr. Patricia Shea. In this conversation, Pat and I deep dive into the workings of the Celtic Wheel that Pat refers to as a companion on the pilgrimage of life. This discussion is not about rituals, but more about the spiritual concepts that Pat has gleaned from her experiences with Celtic spirituality. Our informal exchange focuses on each season and the special gifts that each month of the year brings. This interview was conducted at the end of December 2020 and will start in the season that we find ourselves in, Samhain. I hope you enjoy it. So, welcome back to the podcast, Pat. It's very good to see you again and talk to you again.
And it's lovely to be here again. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me back.
Oh, I'm very, very happy to have you back. Some of the listeners were wondering if there could be a little bit more explanation about the Celtic Wheel. And you had also mentioned that to me, that you had kind of regretted not going more into depth about all the different aspects of the Celtic Wheel. So I thought, well, let's just come back together and we can talk about it in greater detail. We'll do a deep dive into the Celtic Wheel. This interview will be more of a kind of off-the-cuff, free-form type of thing. I don't really have any questions prepared ahead of time for you. And I just thought we could just go along, and if the questions come up, then they come up. And I will ask them as we go along and throughout each month and each festival.
Right.
So, the Celtic Wheel, what would you like to start by saying about the Celtic Wheel?
Well, thank you, Steph. And I think what you're saying is right. Just as I'm speaking, it'd be lovely if we do this conversationally of saying, well, what do you mean by that? Or what?
Exactly.
Or this is my experience. That's a lovely way to do that. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think the first thing that I'd like to share about the wheel is that it is meant to be more of an invitation and a reminder of how we can live our lives, connected both to earth and sky, water, air, and the other world and the underworld and all of that. And I use this and try to live it in a spiritual sense. So I'm not going to share as it would necessarily be shared as Druids might share it or as neo-pagans might share it. I'm sharing it as a spiritual concept, not always ritualistic. That would be the one thing.
So there are rituals that can be implemented in all of this, but for you, that's not really the highlight, what we're talking about today.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other piece about the wheel is, besides being an invitation and a reminder of how we might live a way or perception of life, which would be for me a spirituality, it's also in a sense a companion on the pilgrimage of life. And we go around the sun, 365 days-ish, depending on how it's that calendar is counting. And the piece with the wheel is that when you look at it, it looks closed. But actually, if we live the Celtic Wheel and live the invitations and the reminders and its companionship, it really spirals. So where we are right now, at the end of December, the beginning of January, we're right in the middle of Samhain, actually going out of Samhain, doing into a transition month. I have lived a lot of Decembers in my life, a whole lot.
Yeah.
And yet, looking at this December in this wheel as it comes around again, my experience and my understanding, my way of living is not the same as it was even a year ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that is for me, very critically important in all of our individual journeys, is that as we use this wheel as a reminder and an invitation and as a companion, it's understanding that I'm on a journey and it's a process, and that this spiral, as I go out and have more times around that particular December, my hope is that I'll get a deeper and a more broad perspective of what all this means. So I am sure that what the wheel is telling me today about December and going into January will definitely be different next year. Mm-hmm. Maybe not dramatically different, and yet it will have to have a shift if I'm going to stay alive and engaged in the life here.
Because you don't go back around to the 0 point again. You don't go back to nil. You keep going forward in a sense. So yeah,
exactly.
In our sense of linear time, anyway.
Right. And that's what makes the wheel so, for me, fun, actually, and delightful, is because it's not linear. It says, no, life isn't linear. You don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can sort of predict the future. And, when you're on this spiral and you're going around the circle, and curiously, that's what we do on this dear little planet, is go around a circle, around another big entity, the sun, the big star. So the linear way of counting of life and calendar works to an extent. But when you're really going to, for me at least, live life, you can't live it linear. It has to be that spiral, that turning.
Right.
We're turning all the time.
Yeah.
We don't fall off, but we are turning.
Right.
So that would be the piece of that. That's how I think that works. The other piece that I find very lovely about this is that there are 8 months that have some sort of a celebration, and the other 4 months are more transitional months, which is a lovely way of looking at how to live a year, is to make sure that we take time intentionally most of the months, and then have a transition month in between, just to say, I wonder what that meant, and I wonder how I use that, and where am I transitioning into next? So that's sort of how that works. So I'm just going to do an overview of it, and then I'll go into each one of the seasons more deeply. In the Celtic understanding, and it's sort of curious because it seems almost all calendars somehow start at this time of year. Not all of them, because the Islamic calendar doesn't start at this time of year, but a lot of the Western cultures start at around this time of year, December, January, that kind of thing. So the beginning of the Celtic year would be Samhain, which would be November 1st, because it's going into the dark. And with that whole sense of, in the Celtic spirituality, darkness is always where we start. We always start in darkness. And then we go into the light, and then we go into the darkness. And then we go into Imbolc, which starts spring, and Beltana, which starts May, which starts summer, and then Lunasa, which starts the great autumn. The curious piece is this, that if you had a circle and you make an X across the circle on its diagonals, I'm not a mathematician, but exit diagonally. Yes. You have 4 quadrants, and then if you put a line between across the quadrants, you get 8 little pie shapes, if you're going to look at the winter. And the curious piece for me that came to me is that I don't do, because I haven't studied it, and it takes a lot of study. I don't do the mythology of Celts, because they have lots in lots of wonderful stories. And, I've read them, but I haven't studied them. I don't know them, so I don't really know Celtic mythology. What I do have a sense of, though, in the wheel is, which I find very, very interesting, is that the season of Imbolc, February 1st, the goddess Bridget is the focus. And then when you go across that line, which would be Lunasa, the exact opposite time of that, August 1st, the god is Lu. So you have, in a sense, that wonderful both and going on all the time. Mid-winter time is Imbolc, which starts spring, which I find so lovely and brilliant of a way of looking at it. And that's Bridget, which is quieter. And Lu is also, in some sense, quieter. They're both crafts people, basically. And we could talk about that, and you can ask about that if you remember. And I remember to say that specifically. But they're related to that somehow, And then when you look at May 1st, Beltana, the beginning of summer, across, if you go over to there, November 1st, Samhain, Beltana has the god Bel and the great light, and Samhain has the great goddess, the Cailleach, the old wise woman. And again, it's so fascinating to me of how they have that both and balance across the wheel, across the year, of this great, May 1st is hysterically wild and, going off to, in a sense, just young childhood, where everything is free. And then you get the exact opposite of the Cailleach, who is quiet and wise. And as some unfortunate folks have named her as the old hag, she really is the old quiet one coming home, coming back to start the whole season of life and death again. That whole season, that whole,
So Bridget or Brigid, or I guess she has different ways to pronounce her name, but this is a goddess that has three aspects, correct? The maiden, mother, crone.
Right.
So does that fit into this schema that you've just
That's a lovely question, because
explained?
Because, and I have the other thing, the three aspects of her, which I find interesting, is that she's the goddess of poetry, so she's creative. She is the goddess of smithery, smithcraft, so she's transformative,
right?
And she's also the goddess of healing. So if you look at her with Bridget as the goddess of the maiden, the mother, and the crone, it's a very interesting image of coming into spring, where that seed is just pushing its way through earth, and it has in itself the fullness of maiden, mother, and crone.
Right.
It's that seedling that's coming through.
Yeah. So it has that potentiality of all things.
Exactly. Okay. And how spring is about that, of potential.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to get off tangent already with my question about the goddess, but so you were talking about the crone, I guess, the old wise goddess in that would be then in Samhain, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So in this sense, this is also representative of things coming to an end, then I would say, like life cycles and things like that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And also, and I'll just jump into that we can start looking at that Samhain and the festival of Samhain. It's really summer's end. That's really what it means.
Right.
And the curious piece is, and this again, this is the month of the solstice. This is also the month in Western countries of New Year's, where we are ending and yet beginning.
Right.
In the Celtic understanding is the ending takes a lot longer than 12 hours.
Right.
We're real close to New Year's Eve. Okay, we're going to end 2021 and oops, we're going to be in 2020. We're ending 2020 and going into 2021. And it's like, we just go from within 1 second, just when it hits midnight, we're there, So we don't even get 12 hours. We get 1 second, to move over, And in this whole piece of reminding and inviting is that life isn't like that. You don't just go from 1 second to the other second and everything has changed. It doesn't work like that. Death is slow. We are all dying. John O'Donohue said this so beautifully, and so do other Celtic writers. And I also know so do Eastern writers say this too. Our very first breath is the beginning of our very last breath. I know Thich Nhat Hanh says that also, and John O'Donohue says that too. So we have a whole lifetime of dying, and in the Celtic Wheel, it's like, but you're going to get a whole lot of chances to figure this out before the end, for the most part. So it ends the year. Samhain does, that piece does, and this going into this, but we have 3 months to try to figure out how does it end and what are the gifts of this time. And that's where I think it's important.
Can we also see this as a period of gestation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because what I have done for myself and what I've shared with others when we gather together with little groups that I have, is we always look at what are the gifts of that season. What do we have from each season? And then within that season, what does each month give to us?
Okay. Let's start doing that.
Yeah. So the Samhain's gifts are just what you said. It's transformation. It's refinement. It's time to go into your core. It's time to get clarity, genuineness. There's an essence about it. When we get to death, and curiously, knowing a few folks intimately who have died, the closer they get to the earth death, there comes to be more of a sense of genuineness, and you get to their essence. And I think that's what the trees do for us in the Northern Hemisphere during Samhain, is we get to see their essence. There's no leaves, there's no flowers, there's no fruit. The fruit and the flowers and the leaves are the result of the essence. And so during this quiet time, during this reflection time, during this restful time of Samhain, the dark, the quiet, we're invited to explore our own essence. And we're invited to be quiet so that we can hear that inner wisdom speak, because she always whispers. She never talks loud, which is really hard for me to catch on to a lot of times, I'll tell you, because I'm like, yeah. So to listen to that whisper and to have time, because you don't want to go out very much either. We tend to go into the hearth fire, our own and each other's. And if we do this well, we start to understand the need to slow down, to be quiet, to let go. You know, how often we think of in the Western world with New Year's coming on, what's your resolution? You know, well, Samhain asks, what do you need to let go?
Mm-hmm.
Not what do you need to do. What do you have to let go?
Yeah. Different way of looking at it.
Isn't it?
So
Isn't it?
Completely shifts the perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other piece that Samhain invites us into is that we start to understand that our essence is connected to our ancestors. That during this time, ancestors, all ancestors, not just human ancestors, but the plants, the animals, the stones, the huge mountains and the great rivers, those are all our ancestors. And during that time, we're invited to go into the essence of it and to start having, because we can be quiet enough. And a lot of times when we do have to stay in, we don't have a lot of people around. Maybe the folks we live with, but we don't have people over and we're not going out as often, most typically. It's a wonderful time to start connecting with the ancestors. And in my frivolity, I think, well, we need to have a tea party for the ancestors, you know. So I get a cup of tea and you sit down and just to be quiet and start to reflect on who has gone before you and who are not only your ancestors of genealogy, but who are your ancestors of spirit and of knowledge, and who are your ancestors of gentling and civilizing. And it's a wonderful time if you've had any time at all to reflect on how did I get to where I am now, which is the question of going to the essence. Mm-hmm. It's a lovely time to say, well, who's influenced me? So whose ancestry am I living from also?
I see. Okay.
I really love that.
Okay, so
myself.
This is actually then the wheel provides this space for us
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do this, because at other points in the wheel, I'm sure there's a lot of other activities that you have to do in the sense of connected with nature and things like that. You know, you're doing other things at different times throughout the year. And since this is the period of quote unquote death, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, the period of quiet, the period of where everything just kind of, or you could say the period of sleep, period of, what do they say? The trees go into a sense of, what's that? I can't think of the word. I want to say hibernation, but that's not what
but it works. Hibernation works.
But yeah, that period of like you're going inward in a sense. The trees don't produce the sap, they don't produce the whatever it is that they need to produce to be able to allow the leaves to bud and blossom, and the flowers and the fruit. That is all shut down. It's like they're going inside. So this is symbolic and also very literal. It's not just a figurative type of going inside, because we are usually inside when it's, cold and nasty weather, usually stay inside, but it's that figurative also going inside and having that time of reflection. And as you said, having these moments where you normally are not, at least maybe if I'm thinking about myself, I'm normally not thinking a lot about who's been influencing me, who's gone before me and those types of things. So this is very nice that this is actually just already built into the wheel, that we have this opportunity to be able to reflect like that.
Exactly. And I would suggest that when we are quiet, when the trees are what we think sleeping and the animals are hibernating, they're doing essential work of recreating.
Yes.
You know, which
right.
is so fascinating. That's that lovely piece about the both and, you know, that they are being. And I do believe the hardest work we have to do is being, not the doing, the being. And Samhain is that hard time. It's hard. Winter is very hard for very many people. Light deprivation, lack of connection with other people, cold that they hate, you know, all of it's hard. It's really hard. And the invitation is to start to become at least acquaintances with that. If you're not going to become friends right away, at least become an acquaintance with the hard pieces, which is also death, that we start to become acquainted with our death, that we start to maybe we don't want to be friends with death yet. Eventually, hopefully, when we get closer and closer to the moment of that, what we would call death, that somehow I become more comfortable with that concept that, everything, there's nothing on this planet Earth, this dear, beautiful little blue speck in the universe that does not have what we would term a death. It goes away. There's an end. And yet somehow in that whole process, there's also a recreation. So during this very quiet time of seemingly doing nothing, the recreation and the rejoining and integrating is happening. So that when spring comes, that little plant that pops itself up from the earth, or the little bird that gets laid in the egg, or however that doesn't happen in 1 second like we think it does, from 11:59, and then you count down, and then all of a sudden it's midnight and we're in a new year, 2021. Woohoo! Those it doesn't work like that. And Samhain is helping us remember that, when I said, I think the wheel is this invitations for remembering and reflecting. And that's what it actually is doing. It's helping us remember. Death happens. Right. Death is. And how not to be afraid of it.
And death is not the end.
Exactly. Yeah. Which we all think, because we dear humans, although we think we have the capacity to understand the other, whatever that might be, we don't. We have not a clue. We try, and we're desperately trying all the time. That's why we have all these different theologies, philosophies. We're always trying to figure it out, and they're all like little pieces of the puzzle, trying to help us get this puzzle that's so great we'll never be able to put it together. But I think it just sort of is like, we died, but something happens to this material piece. The material piece recreates somehow. If we weren't in the Western world so concerned about preserving the body even after death, how we go to all of that. In many traditions, you burned it became fertilizer,
It transforms.
To help transform, exactly. Yeah.
But if it's if you look at it in terms of energy, it can't be destroyed. It can't. It doesn't die in that sense. It just becomes something different.
Yes.
So, in that sense,
I'm sorry I interrupted you, Steph.
No, you didn't. I was
going to say my image of death. It has changed over the years, obviously. But right now, my image of death is the last breath I take, and then it just goes, the energy just goes poof. It gets absorbed into this great cosmic energy that we're all part of.
Right.
And then however that energy reforms or redoes or whatever, I haven't a clue. I mean, who really, I shouldn't say this, but who really does, honestly, have a clue what happens afterwards?
Right.
I mean, we do get senses of people's spirits and things that we know that the energy of who we are isn't totally dissipated somehow. Mm-hmm. Even if it's brought back together by memory.
Right.
By dream. That energy is there then somehow. But I just think that energy is just going to go poof. And the great cosmic energy will embrace it, and who knows what happens next.
Right. I think it was Aleister Crowley that would say we were all made of stars.
Yeah, right.
So we go back to being stardust, I guess.
Yeah.
So we become a star again or become something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all of the recreations and the regenerations and any of those senses of how do we come back, they probably somehow that energy is used.
I know it's interesting though that you said that even if you don't ascribe to any type of sense of, speaking of in terms of spirit or soul or those types of concepts, that memory is of the people who are still here, that you're still alive in that sense. Yes.
And isn't it lovely to think that we don't have to think just one way? We're all alive somehow. Yeah. There's people who have made an impression on me that I don't know their names. Just some people that you see. Mm-hmm. I remember one woman specifically that I saw her do something. To this day, I still am amazed at the sense of generosity and love that she expressed in just one little gesture of throwing a kiss.
Yeah.
Her memory is in me somehow.
Yeah.
So we don't know how we are continuing, after we finish.
Myriad of ways of continuing. There's not just one way. Yeah.
I can't imagine it could only be one way.
Are there any colors or speaking more in terms of natural materials like gemstones or plants, herbs, things like that are associated with each month in the Celtic Wheel?
I am absolutely sure they are, and I don't know what all they are. Which would be, that's that piece of, oh my heavens, there's so much for me to learn. I won't have a lifetime to get it all. But yes, there are. And actually, the four major celebrations do have colors. And Samhain is red.
Okay.
It is the color of red.
Okay.
And it's an interesting, because it's interesting too, because the holly is red. Mm-hmm. The things that remain often are that red. You think of, the blood that runs within us that we don't see all the time. Mm-hmm. But if you cut yourself, it's red.
Yeah.
Yeah. Red has some wonderful symbolisms, and you can play around with them. I also think that, however, different cultures ascribe colors, because they do ascribe different colors, that one of the pieces that is fun, and I think playful, is to use the color and let it speak to you. Let her tell you what it means for you. Because red probably means something different for you than for me.
Right.
Yet there's probably things that are the same. Mm-hmm. But red is that color of Samhain. And then white is the color of Imbach.
Okay.
Green is the color of Beltana, and gold is the color of Lunasa. And each one of those colors, if you think of them, have different meanings and spiritual qualities that they represent. That you can do that. Mara Freeman does a nice job in her kindling the Celtic spirit of telling you about different herbs and animals and
Right.
all of that. They're all so. I've never memorized them because I just keep going back and reading them every year. My filing system of memory doesn't go that deep.
Well, and there's really no need to. It's right there at your fingertips. But I will make sure I list that again in the notes, chalicecenter.net. And I took a look at it myself. She goes through each month of the sacred year, as she calls it, and gives a lot of different explanations about that. Right. I did notice that. So,
and if I could also add, in her book, in the book itself, she gives you recipes of things to make during that time, and
food,
foods and
drinks,
activities,
because
all of that.
Looking at the website right now, I have my laptop open, and for January, she's talking about in Wales and Cornwall and other parts of Britain, January 6th, the 12th night was the time to go wassailing. So
so she has a recipe for that.
Yeah, and she has a recipe for that, and indeed. And there is of course, the traditional carols about going wassailing that are sung a lot of in December, of course, around Christmas, Yule.
Right.
Those traditions are not there for no reason.
Right. And they are, they're there to help us remember, to invite us to go deeper, to do more reflection, just all those kinds of things. And especially at this time of the year. And as you so insightfully said, we're going to be distracted as we continue through the cycle.
Yeah.
We can't stay here forever. Right. And I think that's the other gift of it too, is that it's 3 months, but you start the month out with this great celebration of fire and going in and celebrating ancestors. Then you go into December, and then you have another great celebration of the solstice, which is remembering the light does still come back. We're not going to be here forever. We will get warmth again, all of those encouraging pieces. And then January becomes a transition month.
Okay.
That's the month that we say, okay, what do I do to get ready for spring? What have I done or what haven't I done? There's not any big celebration. January is a transition month.
So you're kind of getting ready for things.
Do you know that both and going up where you have to tidy it all up before you can move on to the next thing?
Right.
That's what transitions, for me, transitions are that. They're the tidying up of what I've been doing so that I can get ready for the next thing that's coming and get that prepared. Okay. And January becomes that for us.
Okay. So then we moved to February, and that was the white.
Yes.
Color?
And probably this is my most favorite season is Imbolc. I love Imbolc. And
that's on February 2nd?
January 1st. It always starts the day before, the night before, rather.
Right.
So January 31st, and then we get this beautiful season of Imbolc. And the reason I love Imbolc so much is I love the symbol of Bridget and what she symbolizes. And she's the goddess of that time, and the Christians took that goddess and made her a saint, and which is lovely because then she keeps living around somehow. She's not gone. She's still here. But she was such a phenomenal, or at least her description and her symbolism was such a phenomenal existence. And as you said, she had the seeds of the maiden, the mother, and the crone. She has these seeds of creativity and transformation and a healing peace that she can bring. February is about that. It's about the imbak really means first milk, and it's the lambing that's going on. This coming. I wish I had it at my fingertips. There's an absolutely gorgeous poem that John O'Donohue reads in one of his CDs. It's called First Sight. It's just gorgeous about these lambs being born into the white snow and not having a clue of what glorious colors are underneath that. You know, that sense of coming in, that hope. Mm-hmm, you know, mm-hmm. The other reason I love imbak so much is that it's so full of hope. Some of the gifts are that very thing. It's the gift of hope, the gift of renewal, of new birth, of new life. The symbol is air. When we were in Samhain, the symbol is the element is earth. It's pretty grounded. It's mm-hmm. deep. It's essence. Okay. When we get to imbak, we get into the element of air and that freedom and that sense of lightness. You know, right. And Bridget, her symbolism to me brings that to me, that sense of how could the Celts, and how in Celtic spirituality, would you think the first day of spring is February 1st? I mean, you know, I share this with my husband and he says, really? You know, we have all of February. It can be one of the coldest times, you know, and the curious piece is, and I think I shared this the last time with you when I have spoken with some good friends who have been brought up on a farm. This is February, at least up here in the northern hemisphere and up in the Iowa, Illinois, northern Illinois area, you really do start thinking about what do we have to get ready for, because March is just around the corner.
Yes.
And tilling the fields and so it really is the beginning of the hopefulness and the planning and the wondering and the cultivating. Yeah. Imbak has all of that. February, March, and April, they're lovely times because they're fresh. You know, that air fresh, you know, freshness of air.
Yes. You know, the windows are open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Air out the house.
Exactly.
Get the stuffiness out.
Exactly. It's I love that part. You know, I just love it. I think it has such a delight after coming out of, we're in this essence and being able to say, as we're coming out of the essence of Samhain, what are we going to bloom into? How is this going? Who are we going to bloom in? What's going to bloom for me? You know, all those wonderful questions we can be asking ourselves as we're entering this time of recreation. During this time of this resurrection, as not only in the Christian tradition, but in other traditions of saying, yes, we are reconditioning and recreating in this resurrection, this recreation of new life. What new life is going to come from me because I did the cold, hard work of essence?
I see. Okay, so I was supposed to ask you, I'm looking down at my notes, I'm supposed to ask you to talk about the craftspeople, that Bridget and Luke were craftspeople. So in this case, is this applicable in this case?
Yes, and we'll come back to it when we get to Luke. But Bridget, when you think of her being the symbol of spring, how we start to create, you know, that recreation, that resurrection, that she is the goddess of crafting new things, crafting poetry,
right? Oh,
literature, crafting the iron, in the fire, and she's also the great goddess of fire, which I love this. If I could share this with you, I love this image.
Yeah, please do.
That fire needs fuel, a spark, and oxygen.
It needs air.
Air, exactly, air. And if the fire works, you will get light, warmth, and a transformation, because the wood is transformed into ash.
Or the metal
is
transformed
into
it's melted and molded into something else. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this fits then with Imbolc being the element of air.
Yes.
The fire needs the air to be able to craft and create.
Exactly.
This is so well thought out. I mean, these people are just so smart.
Brilliant, aren't they? I think this Celtic spirituality is really quite brilliant and actually wise, because when you reflect on it, you see how they have been able to tap into not only the earth, but the other world also. That they had that ability or that sense, because we all still have the ability, but they had that sense and they lived it more fully of that both and. There's more than what meets the eye.
And it's connected. Things are connected that we don't think have any connections. They are connected.
Exactly.
That is very...
That's the ancient wisdom.
Very special.
And yes, it is. And it's not just special to the Celts. I find a need to say this out loud a lot so that other folks know that whatever tradition you follow that gives you light and life and laughter and spirit, if it plucks the strings of your instrumental soul, whatever that is, if it rings true to that, that's what you follow,
Right. And actually, when I was looking into a little bit, my own about the wheel, the idea of the wheel, actually there are other traditions that use this same concept.
Exactly.
It's not just Celtic; it's also Germanic, and I can imagine that's from Asian cultures also use this concept of the wheel. So for this idea of a circular type of movement instead of a straight linear type of movement. So I mean, I think this is kind of a universal symbol in a way that it applies to everybody. It's not just for one particular group of people.
Exactly. And how the culture uses that symbol is particular to those cultures.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
there will be variations, of course, because I believe that in the neo-pagan, I think Wiccans, I'm not an expert in this area, so I don't want to be spouting off a lot of things that I don't know anything about. But I think there are other holidays that are also added to the wheel in these other traditions. Isn't there a Mabon and...
those are just different names that they gave.
Names. Okay.
So, and I'd have to look it up to make sure absolutely, but... I would pronounce it Mabon is the child of the goddess who lost her child. That's very much like Persephone and Demeter, that kind of thing. Yeah, they have. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but I pronounce it Oster or East or Easter. They use that term a lot for the East for the season of Imbolc, and what's happening
names
there. Because of the goddess Easter, who was the goddess of life. And
is that the Ostara or
yes, right, that's right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not fluent in any of these languages, so I'm
not either. And
I'm murdering the pronunciation of this, I'm sure.
I'm sure I am too, Stephanie. So together, it'll sound really funny. We'll do well with this. I do say that if you follow the Wiccan tradition or you follow the Druid tradition, you'll find different words.
Okay.
I haven't. I've done reading of those traditions. I'm more comfortable with a broader spirituality enclosure and not going down, but there are specific rituals that you can do, and I've used some of them, and I use them as a resource. I'm not committed to that path, as some are committed to that.
Sure, but that fits then with what you were talking about, how this is more of a universal outlook. With the way you're speaking of it now. As you said in the beginning, you're highlighting the broader spiritual aspects of this, and we're not talking about specific rituals or specific names or things like that. But yeah, it's a concept. In any case, it's a concept that can be adapted and made very specific for particular purposes. So, which is very nice. It's as far as symbols go, it's very versatile.
Yes, it is. And obviously, as you referenced, all the different cultures who are using it in different ways, it is very versatile. And isn't it curious? We are on this little round blue dot. Yeah. We go around on the axis every day. We're twirling, and then we're also twirling around the sun star, So, the day star that we travel around. So it's sort of like, it's almost like a duh. Yeah, of course it's a circle.
We're always turning.
Right. Some of us more than others.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we left off at Imbolc and that's February, March, and April. So don't we have an equinox in March?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Exactly. And that's the other piece that different groups use different names for also.
Okay.
The Druids and the neo-pagans do too. The curious piece about this, again, is that Imbolc, when you're still in the feeling like the dead of winter, the first January 31st, February 1st, you feel like you're still in the dead of winter. You're invited to start thinking of spring and light and air and freshness. And then we get March, which is the spring equinox, which has that whole sense of, okay, we only get 2 times in the entire circle where we get a sense of a moment of balance. Isn't that fascinating? Only twice in 365-ish days.
Yeah.
Twice. And it doesn't last really long. In a way, it's a time to take a breath. And in the spring equinox, the curious piece with this is that we're going into more light. We're getting into the light. We're still not in the Celtic tradition, we're still not in that half of the year, which is the light half of the year. Okay. It's just in the middle of coming out of the dark half of the year, which is sort of a balancing. And I always think of a balance as a little bit of a rhythm in it, because if you even do scales, the air is always there. So there's always a little bit of a rhythm in that. It's to remind us that, don't worry about this. It's a both and, remember? We have both dark and light. We're going into the light.
Yeah.
Don't be despairing. March, we're in mid-March already. You're starting to see things flower.
Right.
The trees are starting to bud. A lot of them have leaves and flowers and colors, and all of that is starting to happen in March, in that time of equinox. So it's the gifts of that time it was well worth hoping. Your hope isn't in vain. Things are happening. Right. It's a wonderful confirmation, just like that balancing. Yes, life has a both and. Don't worry about it. It's not all one or the other. We'll get through this. It's all right. It's okay. And I think in March to take the time that we call spring to actually start paying attention to what happened and what are the results of that quiet, dark death time. It's that invitation of saying, see what the fruits of that are. It wasn't a wasted time. It was a fruitful time. Look at what's coming.
Right.
Isn't that lovely? I mean, just talk about encouraging.
Yes.
You
it
know?
is very encouraging.
Yeah. And spring is encouraging.
It is.
I mean, it's like, oh, thank God we get to go outside again. You know, it's not
Start to feel the warmth of the sun on your skin. And,
exactly. And the piece that I forget, is all of that has that other world spirit dimension to it, that everything is holy. There's nothing that's not holy. You know, it's that whole sense of we live in this all the time. It's just recognizing it, remembering it.
Mm-hmm. Usually in those moments where you're seeing something in nature that you don't normally see or you haven't seen in a long time, that gives you that sense of wonder. Oh, this is so beautiful. Oh, look at those flowers, or look at that mountain, or look at that river, or those things that you don't, at least, you know, the people who live in cities and things like that, they don't get to see that all of the time. It does evoke a sense of awe.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Very, very lovely. Very, very lovely and very beautifully stated too. And then we go into April, which is that transitioning month again.
Okay.
You know,
so
a lot of times
January and April
are transition months.
Okay.
Again, and curiously, in the Christian calendar, a lot of times the Easter will fall in that month of April also.
Right.
Again, it's more a sense of the recreation, the resurrection, the sense of new life, of new hope, that we have the capacity to grow into something more and better than what we had been, if we want to.
Okay.
The capacity is there.
So it's not at its peak yet, but it's getting there.
Right.
So.
Exactly. And that's, I think, is one of the gifts of April, is to remind us that we have the essence within us. The potential is there. It's what I do with it. If I cultivate it, or if I just ignore it and it just has its short life and goes away, or has no life at all. You know, but most of it does.
Okay. So that's our opportunity again to reflect a little bit about what's going on in our lives then at that moment, what we can, what we have been cultivating before, and how we're still nurturing it in that sense.
Okay. Exactly. Right.
Okay.
It's a looking back for me. Imbolc is a looking back and a sense of, and especially when you get to April, is, wow, what have I been doing with the potential that resides within me?
Okay.
Imbolc is that beginning, that spring, that popping up from the earth. You know, it's an invitation to start to reflect on, during that transition time, what wants to pop, what wants to be nurtured, what is that creativeness within me that wants to start expressing herself, that Bridget would be encouraging. It's and as we move into Beltana, which would be in many ways the the adolescence of who we are. Each one of these has, Samhain is we're in the womb, Imbach is we've been born, and then we're going into Beltana, which is the riotous young child
Youth.
to adolescence, youth. I mean, just
that
free for all.
Exuberance.
To the nth degree exuberance. And April is getting us ready to be looking towards that. That is, and if I use this wheel well, the invitation is what needs to be nourished so that it can flourish, so that there can be that exuberance in it.
Right. Because in Imbolc, then, when things are just starting to burst through the crust of the soil, they're still very volatile. They're still very tender and delicate and fragile. They need caring for. The little lambs need caring. The little baby birds need caring. The little plants, they also need tending to. You can't just leave them. Oh, they'll die. So
exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is I like this symbolism that you're getting, that's always reflected in things that you see in nature that you can then apply to yourself in that figurative sense of what do I need to nourish and care for because it's still so fragile.
Exactly. Right.
So then it can grow to be that exuberant thing in May. When Beltana comes.
Right.
So whatever that may be that's going on, whatever that may be, that needs that special care and attention and nourishing, as you said, then you have that fruition then in the next period. So then we come to May.
Right.
And May was what color again? Green?
May is green.
Green, okay.
Right. You just, if you think of spring green, it's that kind of, it's just there. Bright, yeah. Exactly. bright green. And
nothing subdued about this green.
Oh, no, nothing at all. And, when you think of it, Beltana is the goddess that's connected to that is Bel, who just means bright sunlight, basically. What it means, is the sun. The great Bel is the sun. And you think, it's daylight. We can go and do whatever, run every place, see everything. And you don't have inhibitions because you see more. You can be more frivolous in a sense and take more risk in a sense because you see further. It's not like you're in the dark where you can't see.
Right.
You take little steps. When you are in the full sunlight, it's like, oh my God, this is so great. And then you just go berserk in my mind. When you read what, at least when I've read some of the things that they do during Beltana, that the Celts had done during Beltana, it's like, oh my, they are just footloose and fancy free. Everybody, no matter what age you are.
Right. This is the fertility rituals and all of that.
Yes,
right?
Everything. Everything is going on. It just, you can try out 2 or 3 different partners and see if you like them, maybe 10 or 15 if you're that ambitious. It's just like, it's a pure free for all. And in some respects, it's just like, what a smart way to do it, just try it out, everything was a great celebration. It was sad.
So if this is a period then where you're trying things out, is this also when they do the hand fasting or not?
That's during Lunasa.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Because you got to first find who you might want to hand fast. Oh, that's right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. You got to, go to different partners and see if you can do the hand fasting. And then when you get to the Lunasa, you get to do the hand fasting, which I think is a brilliant thing that says we're going to see if we can actually live together. And you get a whole year. And then when you come back, yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
If it works, I do too. And when it works, we're doing that now more and more, thankfully.
That is, yeah.
I mean, in my mind, I say thankfully, so that you don't make that commitment that gets harder and harder to extricate from. But if it didn't work, you just went back to back and walked away. It was a lovely way of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, just saying, it was a great try, but sorry, it just didn't work.
Right.
And so they would go back, they stand back to back and then just walk in two different directions.
Okay.
And isn't that a lovely symbolism, even for ourselves, of what we've been trying to do? If we go in May, in June, and July, and are going, in my words, berserk in creativity and just every good thing that we can do and trying everything out and doing all that when we get to Lunasa, and we do this in the spirit too, and in our own personal journeys, emotionally and psychologically and spiritually, it's an invitation to say, get out of the box, flatten it.
Right.
See what else is out there. What other opportunities might be there for you, professionally, personally, spiritually, mentally, all of those. Start looking at that with such a sense of freedom, because that's what Beltana, one of the gifts is that freedom to do that.
And then, did we get ahead of ourselves with the solstice?
Right.
We're June, correct?
Exactly. And isn't this an interesting piece that we end the longest day right in the middle of that wild, crazy, we get the longest day there to get to do, to celebrate even more.
Right.
And in the spiritual realm, it's the invitation to start celebrating more who you are, what your potential is, what you're doing with it. Really, Beltana and Lunasa are the doing times, where Samhain and Imbolc are the quiet times, the being times. Even though we're springing up and looking at new things, it's still not what I would call the unleashed creative sense that we can be in during that time.
So could we look at it as like active and passive? That there are still things happening, but it's just happening the passive months. Things are still, you're still working, you're still doing, things are still happening, but it's all very in the background. It's not out in the open.
Exactly.
And then these other months were very active, and it's all out in the open, and it's for everyone to see because there's the light. Everybody sees everything.
Exactly.
So, okay.
Exactly.
Is this the time of the ripening of this, that it's come into its full maturity, or has that not happened yet?
It's on its way.
It's on its way.
It's not quite there. It's toward that, but it's not. You're not finished.
Okay. So there's still a lot of energy that's needed to be able to get to that full.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's why we have all of this exuberance and energy and freedom to be able to do all of that.
Right. And to take us into that next season of Lunasa, because that's hard work again.
Right. That's the harvest then time, right? Harvesting
that's right.
time? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that is
so
hard
when
work.
we're in Beltana, we get to explore, we get to take risks, we get to celebrate, we get to be frivolous.
Right. So having fun.
Exactly.
Before we do the hard work.
Exactly.
Okay.
Aren't they brilliant?
It makes so much sense. So we had, that's in May, June, and what's happening then in July? Is that also a transition?
Yes.
Okay, here we
July
go.
is the next transition. That's right. And July is a lovely time to be thinking of pilgrimage.
Oh.
And Maura Freeman has a beautiful piece in her July reflections on pilgrimage. And I have often thought, here you were deep in thought and reflection in Samhain. We start to look at things in Imbolc and nurture the potentiality. Here we are in this great Beltana season where everything is just coming to bloom, all right there, all this great energy. And Maura Freeman suggests, and a great time to have the energy to take the pilgrimage that you might need to take. That can be an interior pilgrimage of going into a sacred place or a sacred time. It can be an actual pilgrimage of going to a sacred place. And in the Celtic tradition, everything was sacred. So you might want to do a pilgrimage that would take you to places maybe where you had lived, to houses. I've done a couple of pilgrimages of going back to the places where I lived in my life.
Okay.
And just, driving, going and just having it as an intentional time, because pilgrimage is intentionally knowing, which I think we're always on pilgrimage in our life. It's just a time, though, that we intentionally know that there are some sacred lessons and insights waiting for me if I take the time to go. I have to go to them, though.
Okay.
I have to travel to them. So you might take a pilgrimage, an actual pilgrimage, because there's all kinds of them. The difference between a vacation and a pilgrimage is the intention, the intentionality. So you can be going someplace. I know Chuck wants to go to the Scottish Highlands. Well, because of his ancestry and heritage and all that. And when we do go, it'll also be a pilgrimage, because it'll be going back to his roots, to mine also, to those sacred places that are always sacred, because human beings and other great creatures of this earth are there or have been there.
Right.
By presence. That's, so it can be a both and, Exactly. You can have, pilgrimage. Unfortunately, so much of the spirituality has been so dour and so heavy. And
I think that when people think of the word pilgrimage, they're thinking of crawling on your knees up a mountain,
right,
and suffering,
exactly.
and that type of
but
thing.
You know what? Yeah. When you go on vacation / pilgrimage, you don't get to take your whole house with you. You have to choose what you can take.
Yeah.
If you do a lot of walking, you usually are going to get blisters or some kind of something sore. If you bought a new outfit, it's not going to fit the way you thought, and you're not going to be comfortable in it. And you think about, those are all the spiritual messages,
Yeah.
It's like pilgrimage is not a piece of cake, but it could be, it's exploratory. That's the whole piece of why you do it in Beltana, because you take the risk.
Yeah.
You have the energy. You've flattened the box. You've done all that, so you can go explore.
But there is an effort there.
Absolutely.
It's not just for whatever reason. There is an intention, as you said, and you have to make an effort to do that.
Exactly.
So, okay.
Yeah. And a planning.
Yes.
Some sort of a planning. Yeah.
Okay.
So isn't that a lovely transition of going from the riotousness of summer, intentionally saying, I'm going to go on pilgrimage, and the pilgrimage can be internal. You can, I have a couple of finger labyrinths, which are a symbol of pilgrim. So July is a nice time to sit outside and do a finger labyrinth, or make your own little labyrinth, because there's all kinds of sites you can go on to get pictures of them and all of that. But a time to say, what do I need to intentionally visit within myself, within my soul, within this journey of human life I'm on? A lovely time to be looking at that before we get to Lunasa, which is the harvesting time.
Okay. And I'm curious then to know how that idea of the pilgrimage, I'm a little stuck, I guess, to say, that seems to suggest that we're already moving into a more quiet time then, but we still have all this hard work that we have to do. So how does how does that fit? Let's just move on, and it's going to become very clear to me. I'm sure it will.
I think the questions you're asking, Stephanie, are exactly the right questions to ask, because those are the questions we would be asking on pilgrimage. How is this fitting? I have this energy. I'm going on this trip. I'm going a little deeper, being more reflective, and yet I'm getting ready to go into a hard work. It's like, that's what gives us the impetus and gives us the courage to do the hard work.
I think it's starting to become clear now. You have to have that intention, that focus, to be able to channel that energy that you have to be able to do the work. Otherwise, It's just wasted energy. It's wasted effort. Correct? Okay.
Yes,
I'm getting it. I'm starting
to
get it.
You have it. You have it, Stephanie. There's no getting. You got it. You have it. You got it. Because what is going on is that we get 3 months basically to play, where we're encouraged to play. And then you do exactly as you said. You focus that energy. You challenge that energy, and you channel the energy. Both. Challenge it and channel it so that you can do the hard work of harvesting.
Right. Okay. So this is then, what was this next season called?
This is Lunasa.
Lunasa.
And that's the great god Lu, who connects with Bridget, who was the craftsman, who could do everything.
And his name is spelled Lugh?
H.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the curious piece about this celebration is that Lu is not really the focus of the celebration. It's his promise he made to his stepmother. Because Twalchwa, I think, and I'm butchering that poor dear name, the poor dear woman, she's the one who went and cleared the forest so that there could be some fields for grain and that they would have food to eat through agriculture. Lu's stepmother did that, took care of him when he was in his human form. She did this. I mean, now on their earth, mind you, so this is this beautiful mythology. And what she wanted and what he wanted, that when she did all of this hard work, she died because she worked so hard for the harvest, that it would come to fruition.
Okay.
So what he did, what Lu did, and what Lunasa is about, is the celebration, the promise he made to her that he would celebrate her efforts and energy and life that she gave to earth that brought harvest.
Okay. So it's not just the working of the harvest, but also you said it was the promise of celebrating that hard work.
Exactly.
That allowed there to be a harvest to begin with. That's right.
Okay. Exactly. And so when Lunasa starts in February, even when I was younger, we had lots of festivals then. We still do. Mm-hmm. We have state fairs and county fairs, and those are all around the end of July, beginning of August, something like that.
Okay.
That's has roots in the celebration of Lunasa.
Okay.
Because that was a coming together, a celebrating, because it was only the first harvest, because the only thing that was really, really ready were a few things, some wheat, apples,
yeah.
Some other thing. I can't remember, because Mara Friedman lists some of them, which is really beautiful. And she has a great recipe for a soup that you can make in August, and with potatoes. Potatoes are, you can start digging up the potatoes, So it's the first harvest, and it's a celebrating of, the harvest came, because it's just the beginning, Yeah. So Lu says during Lunasa, the great feast is, we are celebrating her hard work, the life. We're going to celebrate the harvest. So all of this frivolity, I guess, is what I'm looking for. All of that frivolity is saying, okay, let's, as you said earlier, channel it. See, we've got the hard work. And yet use that last gasp of energy to celebrate, we got a harvest and it's coming to, it's like, oh, thank God we got something to do. We got work ahead of us, It's in a way celebrating the fact that we get to actually harvest the hard work that we put in, especially during Samhain and Imbolc.
Well, if you don't have that harvest, if you don't have that, whatever it is that you are, that you're harvesting, then you're not going to have anything. Your food stores are going to be empty if you don't have that harvest.
Right.
So if you're thinking in terms of agriculture and living off the land and that type of thing, then yeah. So it's a very important time. If you don't have that bounty to be able to harvest, then you will be starving when it comes.
Exactly. When Samhain comes, you'll be starving instead of having things in your cellar that you can pull out.
Right.
And the same thing is applicable to our spiritual journey. If we haven't done the hard work, we will not be able to be harvesting the fruits of that. We won't be able to be harvesting the wisdom that's within us.
I see. Yeah.
And we will go into despair and depression in the winter months.
Yeah, it's a deprivation then that we will experience because we haven't been paying attention to the work that we needed to do.
Right. And we haven't been living the gifts of the seasons.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah, living the gifts. And that puts a different focus on it than doing the hard work.
Yeah. I love it, Stephanie. It does. Yeah.
Because it's going to be work regardless.
Exactly.
But it's how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the wheel invites us to live it.
Yeah.
Knowing in that wonderful spiritual sense of both and, it is both hard work and fun. It's both playful and it's both serious.
Right. Yeah.
And there's times for each. Mm-hmm. You don't do them all at, when you look at the wheel, you're not doing all of those things at the same time.
Exactly.
There's a time, that wonderful Old Testament, a time for all things under the sun.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
There is a time for it all. And if we live it the best we can, then we'll be able to actually receive and use the gifts of each one of those seasons. And in that spiral, when we keep spiraling around, we'll get to see, I really didn't use May in its fullness when I get there last year. I'm going to really go out for it now. I want to stop being in this box. I'm going to be more creative. I'm going to be more open to the gifts that come. And in Lunasa, the gift is water, fluidity. Is that interesting?
Yeah.
That we start to see that if I live in Samhain, in the earth, come to Imbolc, in the air, get energized through Beltana in the fire, have the fluidity of living both and during Lunasa, I can go back to Samhain in peace.
It's quite logical as well. There's no, it's very rational way of looking at things, even though you were talking about a spiritual concept that could be considered more irrational than rational. This is, I don't know, maybe it's because it's so grounded in nature, and nature is so, I don't know if methodical is the right word, but there is, it's like running on its own clock, it has its own rhythm, its own system. And we can work with it and reap the benefits of it, or we can work against it or ignore it or abuse it.
Right.
and
Right.
then be completely bankrupt because of it.
Yes.
So in that sense, it's very logical. It makes total sense.
And the gift of the Celts and of other indigenous perspectives, those are so rich because they were so grounded in the wisdom of earth and so well grounded in understanding we are also of earth, and it's in the clay of our beings, this earth wisdom.
Right. The color associated with Lunasa was gold?
Golden.
Golden.
Mm-hmm. Golden. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Golden. Because of harvesting.
Richness.
Richness.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that makes sense too. Everything makes sense. This is just...
It resonates, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. There's nothing about this. I mean, I had my little moment there when we were talking about pilgrimage that I thought, what? This doesn't seem to make sense. But no, it does. It does. And everything makes sense. It's such a grounded system because you can see it happening around you, literally. But at the same time, it's so...
I would use ethereal.
Yeah, that too. But it has this poetic truth to it as well. That if you think about it in those more ethereal ways or the more symbolic ways, it also has this strength and power behind it, just like nature does. Nature is so strong.
Right.
And that strength is there too.
Right. And I'm interrupted you because that sense that you used of poetry is so perfect, because poetry is metaphor and symbol, and it has a power and a wisdom beyond the words. So what we see in nature has that power and wisdom that we can see, and yet it is the metaphor for the spiritual journey, the spiritual pilgrimage.
Right. And there's beauty there as well.
Yes.
This is very, very powerful stuff. I like it.
I'm grateful, and I'm glad you like it. The only other piece that's very fascinating too is that you can live the wheel within a day's time. You go to bed at night,
right?
You get up in the morning. There's noon, then there's sunset, and then you go to bed. So the wheel is also applicable to our daily circle of life.
Right. So we have that microcosm in the macrocosm idea. Yeah.
The other piece that I have found in sharing this is that we can be in different spaces of this wheel outside of the earth time.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was wondering about that too. You know, what happens when you do find yourself in this, maybe an exuberant period in your life, and you're, in the calendar year, you're in Samhain.
Yeah. Right.
So what do you do then?
You follow that internal calendar at that moment, because we all have been in those moments. We have been in Samhain during Beltana.
Right.
We have been in Imbach during Lunasa. We're just starting. Things are just starting, and we're in the season of that great harvest.
Right.
What I have found is that when I can name the season I'm in myself, I can encourage myself to continue the circle of the wheel, that I don't get stuck in that season. In my spiritual, emotional way. So if I'm in that sense of Samhain in the summer and wanting to be quiet and reflective, I use that time to know that I'll eventually get to this great energy time. And I have to keep intentionally moving around. We don't,
right.
We can obviously get stuck in we get stuck in a season, however that would be. The piece of remembering the wheel is the invitation to keep going, to continue the spiral, keep walking, keep turning. Yeah. Don't, and if you need that time, so for some, a 3-month time might be a 3-year time, or even a 30-year time. It's still the sense of knowing I can continue to walk, I can continue that journey, I can continue the spiraling. I'm not really stuck.
Even though it might seem that way for a little while.
And it seems like that even as we live the year. There's times in January that you feel like it's never going to end.
Eternal winter.
Yes, exactly. So those are real and natural responses. And that's why knowing about the wheel or about ourselves, that we continue the cycle, the journey. And it's not a dead end.
Right. And like you said, it helps us to remember.
Yes.
Even if you do feel stuck, wait, I'm not really stuck. Because I can remember all of these other things that are helping me to keep moving.
Right.
Keep turning.
Exactly. And I think when we feel stuck, it's that little urge, especially if we realize we're stuck, is that urge to say, okay, where am I stuck? What's going on? What do I need to do during this time?
Also important. Because sometimes being stuck has a purpose too.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Getting some new insights here as we talk. Yeah. Interesting. A lot of food for thought.
I hope so. For me, it has always been a great food for thought and reflection. And what has always surprised me, which is, as I say this out loud, I'm thinking, really? Yeah, it really does. It surprises me. Every season I go through, I go, wow, I never thought of it like that before, or I didn't have that insight. And there's something just quite lovely about using it, even if I don't look at it all the time. If I'm aware, I use it more because I've been doing this more intentionally. But when I share it with others, I don't never get hung up on, oh my heavens, I have to celebrate this at this particular time. We're in Samhain. If you forgot November 1st and your ancestors, well, so what? You still have 3 more months. And if you really want to, you can do a whole year of Samhain and then go a whole year of Mbach and do, it's all right. It's when we get these absolute ways of having to live something. And that's where I find this so encouraging, is that there's no absolute. The circle goes round. The spiral keeps going.
Yeah.
Invitations never stop coming. That's the other piece that I find so encouraging. The invitations are always there.
I think this is just a beautiful thing. And I'm so thankful that you came back to talk about this in such detail. I too had the feeling that, after we did our first talk, that I thought, there's probably so much more that could be said. But of course, we'd be talking for days. But it's nice to just stand still with this concept, because it is such an important symbol. It's an important, concept in and of itself. But how this has been interpreted and how it's expressed, I just find this very, very beautiful thing. And thank you for sharing this. I'm going to be really pondering all of this, I'm sure, as is my nature. I'm usually pondering things a lot. But a lot of really beautiful, not only lessons, but beautiful ideas to reflect on. I really appreciate that. And I think that the people who have said something to me about, could she come back and talk about this more, that, maybe the other people will have the same feeling too. So
I hope so. And it is just an absolute soulful pleasure to be with you and to share. No, truly, it really has been. And thank you for letting me share and inviting me to do that.
Well, you're very welcome. Very
grateful.
welcome. I'm very, very happy that you're here with me today, and that you've talked about all of this, and that we can share it with other people. My deepest thanks again to Pat for taking the time to share these teachings with me and with you too. As we start the new year of 2021, I wish you all health, joy, and many opportunities to explore and learn. As Pat says, keep turning. Continue the journey. It's not a dead end. The spiral keeps going. Thanks for listening.